Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we will be looking at the 1939 classic from director Frank Capra, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. With me are Ken.
Look, when I came here, my eyes were big blue question marks. Now they're big green dollar marks.
And Ted.
Liberty's too precious a thing to be buried in books. Men should hold it up in front of them every single day of their lives and say, I'm free to think and to speak.
And I'm Eric. Yippee! And if you've seen the movie, you will know that line. We are talking Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Ted, give us the details of this one.
Okay, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is directed by Frank Capra with a screenplay by Cindy Buckman and Miles Connolly, who is an uncredited contributor to the script. It's based off of the unpublished story, The Gentleman from Montana, by Lewis R. Foster. It has a running time of 130 minutes, a release date of October 17th, 1939. It had a budget of $1.5 million and a box office gross of $9 million. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington stars Jean Arthur as Clarissa Saunders, Jimmy Stewart as Jefferson Jeff Smith, Claude Rains as Senator Joseph Harrison Joe Payne, Edward Arnold as Jim Taylor, Guy Kibbe as Governor Hubert Happy Hopper, Thomas Mitchell as Diz Moore, Eugene Pillette as Chick McGann, Beulah Bondi as Ma Smith, H.B. Warner as the Senate Majority Leader, Harry Carey as the President of the Senate, and Astrid Alwyn as Susan Payne. Now, the interesting thing about the cast of this movie, like we've discussed in our last episode about You Can't Take It With You, a lot of these actors are considered studio actors because back in the day you signed with a studio, you didn't sign on to a particular movie. And Capra had a group of regular actors that he worked with. 11 of these actors would go on to play roles in It's a Wonderful Life. Of course, Jimmy Stewart as George Bailey, Thomas Mitchell was Uncle Billy, Beulah Bondi was George's mother, H.B. Warner was Mr. Gower, Charles Lane was Potter's rent collector. There's a few others, Dick Elliott and Sam Ash, Stanley Andrews, and Larry Sims and Ray Walker all ended up in It's a Wonderful Life.
Hey, the Crow's not in this one, is it?
No, the Crow's not in this one. From our last episode on You Can't Take It With You, Jean Arthur, Jimmy Stewart, Edward Arnold, Beulah Bondi, and H.B. Warner were all in that movie as well.
Well, tell us what the reviewers thought of this.
On Rotten Tomatoes, this has a critic score of a certified fresh 97%, and it has an audience score of 94%. So all of the critics that I found were from 1939, amazingly enough. We'll start with the negative critics. Cyril Ray of The Guardian said, "Good scripts have saved Capra in the past from being a bore. Mr. Deeds and You Can't Take It With You had good lines and funny situations. This time, even famous players do not save him." Otis Ferguson from the New Republic said, "Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is going to be the big movie explosion of the year, and reviewers are going to think twice and think sourly before they'll want to put it down for the clumsy and irritating thing that it is." On the positive side, though, we have May Tenney from the Chicago Tribune. She said, "Adroitly seasoned with the awful truth, it emerges sizzling from the oven of timelessness. Burned craws aplenty there were in the nation's capital following the film's release, and no wonder." Mildred Martin of the Philadelphia Inquirer said, "This contender for Academy honors has warmth as well as wit, beguiling charm as well as pointed satire, and it rekindles a few patriotic ideals that have long slept under the smothering blanket of political scandals and governmental misdeeds."
Well, when was the first time you guys saw this movie? How about you, Ken?
I want to say it's probably before I was a teenager. My dad's a huge Jimmy Stewart fan, huge fan of this particular movie. In fact, while watching this movie, my dad had the opportunity to watch it himself this week, and he was very happy that I had it already in the Blu-ray player ready to go for him. So
Such a nice bonding moment.
there's some things that we get from our parents, and I took it to the next level when it comes to Jimmy Stewart, though. But yeah, my dad is the big influence there when it comes to Jimmy Stewart movies.
Okay. How about you, Ted?
As far as I can remember, I saw this movie in college. That's really the first time I have recollection of it. Being a history major and a political science person that I was in college, this is a movie that would have appealed to me at that point. It's one that endeared itself to me. There's parts of this movie that mean a lot to me.
Well, for me, I probably saw this movie 20 years ago, but I couldn't pinpoint it down. So I would say probably the last couple of weeks I've really watched this thing in some really strong details. So let's just go with that. My memory is much better than it was 20 years ago, and I really wasn't watching it for the type of detail or the substance of the movie 20 years ago.
There's something to say about seeing it when you're like a teenager or even in college, and then seeing it when you're in your 40s and 50s. They have different meanings because now you've lived through life, so now you get to see some of those themes and what they mean now, and we'll touch on that later on in the podcast. But I think initially seeing it and seeing it now, there's going to be different opinions of the movie now.
It's going to be a completely different movie, and you're probably going to have a completely different opinion. We'll focus on the opinion of today, right? It's the one that counts. All right, tell us the plot of this one, Kem.
Governor Hubert Hooper has to pick a replacement for the recently deceased U.S. Senator Sam Foley. Jim Taylor pressures Hooper to choose his handpicked stooge, Horace Miller, while popular committees want reformer Henry Hill. The governor's children want him to select Jefferson Smith, the head of the Boy Rangers, who is a recent local hero. Unable to make up his mind between Taylor's stooge and the reformer, Hooper decides to flip a coin. When it lands on an edge, and next to a newspaper story of one of Smith's accomplishments, he chooses Smith, calculating that the wholesome image will please the people, and at the same time, him being naive will make him easy to manipulate. Junior Senator Smith is taken under the wing of the publicity-esteemed but secretly crooked Senator Joseph Payne, who was Smith's late father's friend. Smith develops an immediate attraction to the senator's daughter as well. Smith's naive and honest nature allows the unforgiving Washington press to take advantage of him, quickly tarnishing Smith's reputation. To keep Smith busy, Payne suggests to Smith that he propose a bill. With the help of the Secretary Saunders, who was the aide to Smith's predecessor and had been around Washington and politics for years, Smith comes up with a bill to authorize a federal government loan to buy some land in his home state for a national boys' camp. To be paid back by youngsters across America, donations pour in immediately. However, the proposed campsite is already part of a dam building graft scheme included in the appropriation bill framed by the Taylor political machine and supported by Senator Payne. Unwilling to crucify the worshipful Smith so that their graft plan will go through, Payne tells Taylor he wants out, but Taylor reminds him that Payne is in power primarily through Taylor's influence. Payne then advises Smith to keep silent about the matter. The following day, Smith tries to speak out about the bill in the Senate, but Payne accuses Smith of trying to profit from his own bill by producing fraudulent evidence that Smith already owns the land in question. Smith is too shocked and angry by Payne's betrayal to defend himself and runs away. Saunders finds Smith and talks to him into launching a filibuster to postpone the appropriation bill and prove his innocence on the Senate floor. In his last chance to prove his innocence, he talks nonstop for about 25 hours, reaffirming the American ideas of freedom and disclosing the damn scheme. His friends try to rally around him, but the Taylor machine is too powerful. Newspaper and radio stations in Smith's home state, on Taylor's orders, refuse to report what Smith has to say and even distort the facts against the senator. The Boy Rangers' effort to spread the news in support of Smith results in vicious attacks on the children by Taylor's minions. Although all hope seems lost, the senators begin to pay attention as Smith approaches utter exhaustion. Payne has one last card up his sleeve. He brings the bins of letters and telegrams from Smith's home state, demanding his expulsion. Nearly broken by the news, Smith vows to press on until people believe him, but he immediately collapses in a faint. Overcome with pains of remorse, Payne leaves the Senate chamber and attempts to commit suicide by gunshot, but is stopped by onlooking senators. He then bursts back into the Senate chamber, shouting a confession and further insists that he must be expelled from the Senate and affirms Smith's innocence to Saunders' delight. The President of the Senate observes the ensuing chaos with amusement. The end.
The end indeed. All right.
So it's a bill to build a dam, right? It's not just a dam building.
It's not just a damn bill.
Damn, Bill. That's right.
Damn you, Bill.
You know what the best water is you get the dam water from the dam man who works at the dam.
Damn the man.
That's right. All right, let's talk about the opening of this one. I've got a little bit of an opinion on this. So, oh boy. So this movie opens, obviously, with the prior senator passing away and everyone panicking to find his replacement. It's kind of funny. It sounds like you're in a James Cagney movie watching this. They're all like, yeah, say, hey, we need to find us a senator. We need to find us a guy, someone on the take. It was crazy. I'm like, oh, please don't let this movie be like this. Please. You know, they're trying to find their handpicked guy. And the other scene that really sticks out to me, and I'm going to be a little harsh here, all right? The governor is obviously an incompetent moron. Right?
Right.
I think we all agree on that. Well, what's the deal with his inbred children? Because they're pretty stupid too. I mean, they can't put two words together. They just look like they're just from the farm. I'm like, you're the governor's kids? What the hell? Seriously.
Yeah, but it's the governor's kids that actually get us Jefferson Smith. I don't actually think that this whole family are a bunch of morons. Actually,
I don't know about that. I don't know. That governor's pretty spineless.
I wasn't expecting that.
Pretty spineless.
Actually, he's not really spineless because he decides to go ahead and nominate Smith without Taylor's approval.
Spineless.
He does it without Taylor's approval, though. So how do you explain that?
Because he thought that this guy was just completely just go along with anything.
Well, yeah, that's the case. So, I mean, in some aspects, I mean, even Payne says that Happy may have came up with something brilliant here. So I don't think he's stupid. I just, like as Ted says, he's a stooge. But he does make this appointment without telling Taylor. Taylor's pretty upset about this because of the fact that he made the nomination and he told everybody and it's in the newspaper. And by the time Taylor finds out, you can't change it. It's too late. So I don't think he's totally spineless. I mean, we could say that also about Payne because when he tries to go up against Taylor, Taylor says, you know what? Go ahead. Do whatever you want to do. See what happens. He backs down too.
Oh, sure.
Everybody backs down from Taylor. So it's hard to say that everybody is wimpy when the guy has their whole careers in his hands. So I don't think he's that bad.
Out of the gate, the governor is just straight a burst into tears. I mean, this is the governor of, let's just say, Montana, right? I mean, the unnamed western state.
That's what we're thinking.
I couldn't believe it. I'm like, seriously?
It establishes
the power that this one person has over everything.
The hierarchy is very quickly defined as to who the true power broker is here. And the governor is not necessarily spineless, but he is a stooge and he is easily manipulated to whichever the way the wind blows. Because he's fully on board with putting up Taylor's nominee until he gets pushback from the committees wanting to assign Hill. And he realizes that the wind starts to blow at him this way. He has no real direction unless that's which way the wind is blowing him. He's even manipulated by his own kids. Yeah. Let's be perfectly honest. Jefferson Smith would have never have been nominated. Well, you can't really say that because, his name was in the paper. He was famous for putting out that fire. We're led to believe that this is like a 2-month assignment. 2 or 3 months is all he's going to have to serve of this term. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for a governor at the time to promote somebody who is considered a local hero flavor of the week type of a person. It would be very difficult to do that in today's day and age, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. But having the kids do it, I think, is kind of...
It's done for comical type of...
Yeah.
We're supposed to laugh at the fact that the kids go up against their dad and it drives him crazy and he has to leave the dinner table basically because of how his kids are. Even the littlest one is on his tails. It's funny, but the kids themselves are not stupid either. I mean, they work for Jefferson Smith. We see them later on helping to distribute the paper. That makes me wonder, though, how much their father is involved in their lives. I mean, you could say that this is basically Boy Scouts of America.
That's what it is.
But they couldn't use that at the time for legal reasons.
Boy Scouts refused to lend their name to it.
Yeah,
they flat out refused, which boggles the mind.
I guess I can understand because it's kind of a political movie, and you don't want to put your name to something political, even if you agree with what the picture stands for.
Especially during that time, no one wants to put their name on anything.
But then these kids of his get in danger. They're in that car, and they got the trumpet going, they're delivering papers, and they get ran off the road by Taylor's henchmen. His minions and stuff. It's kind of
hokey.
Ironic that you are supporting Taylor, but Taylor is going to get your kids killed because they support Jefferson Smith. It's really interesting.
I don't think they were going to kill any of the kids.
No, but I mean, they ran them off the road. You never know.
They were going to put them in
happen.
danger.
Because I think they ran them off the road to the point where they hit a wall or a tree or something to that extent. Somebody could have gotten seriously hurt. I mean, even Jefferson Smith's mom basically says to Clarissa or Saunders,
she's like, "Oh, the children!
Tell them to stop! Children all over the street." One of the kids is a little dark. He's missing a tooth. He's the one that basically goes and delivers the speech but can't get a word out because he's so nervous. But I think the kids are kind of cool in a sense, and I think that comes from Jefferson Smith's leadership for those kids.
Whatever.
Just because you weren't a boy at one time.
That's right. I wasn't in the Boy Scouts of America or the whatever their little clan is called in this. Yeah.
You're the kind of guy that pushes a grandmother into the street instead of helping her across the road. So.
Yeah, that's right. Get your wallet. Yeah.
The whole not lending their name to this, to me, that seems kind of silly. I was a Boy Scout, so this is...
I would have been surprised if they did lend their name to it.
This movie is like, this is what the Boy Scouts stand for.
Yeah, but the whole political ramifications, they didn't know where it was going to go.
There are people in politics at this particular time that don't agree with this movie. I mean, even the president of the United States,
FDR,
didn't like this movie, and there was a lot of senators out there that didn't like it either.
I didn't read that Franklin Roosevelt had anything to say about this, but ironically enough, that Joseph Kennedy, who was the father of John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Teddy Kennedy, he petitioned Universal Studios to not put this movie out. He was part of the campaign to stop the movie, and it's pretty ironic. Because if you really get into the politics of the time, this movie comes out at a time where we're on the slope to World War II. Germany has invaded Poland and things are starting to escalate quickly. One of the most interesting tidbits that I read was after the Nazis invaded Paris, they put laws on the movie theaters. The movie theaters had like a 24-hour period before they came under Nazi control. And there was a couple of theaters in Paris that showed Mr. Smith Goes to Washington for 24 hours straight. So this movie had ramifications across...
That doesn't sound like the French to me.
Yeah,
I don't know about that one, Ted.
The resistance movement in France was very strong. And this movie was outlawed immediately in Nazi Germany by Goebbels. They considered this movie propaganda, which is pretty ironic coming from Goebbels. So this movie did have a political impact across the world. But yeah, there was definitely some American senators that didn't take too kindly. And of course, the press corps, they were not real happy about their portrayal in this movie either. So Capra kind of took some slings and arrows from a few different sides here.
They were calling it that they were communist. This was, pro-communist type of movie. This
pretty
is
ironic.
anti-American.
That sounds like Joe Kennedy and me.
Considering that this movie is quintessentially American, it doesn't get any more American. This movie is a civics lesson for everybody. You want to learn how things get done in Congress, this movie is a boilerplate for exactly...
Bribes and money.
Well, not just that, but how things, how a bill becomes a law.
Money.
Bribes and money. Yep.
So, but no, the ins and outs of what goes into it and what has to happen. There's a lot of really good things that come out of this movie. There's a
lot of good things that come out of this movie, but there's also things like Senator Payne when he talks about having to play ball to Jefferson Smith,
Right.
he says that I had to play ball here so I can get the 1,000 things that I honestly got through, he talks about how well his state is doing. This is probably real stuff. I think this is as real as it gets when he talks about playing ball. You sometimes have to cave into these certain things that benefit certain people so you can get your own stuff that's very important done. Because let's face it, there's at that particular time 118 senators.
There's 48 states with 2 apiece. So there was
senators.
96.
So there's 96 senators, and not all of them are going to play ball. Not everybody's going to be on the same page, so you have to wheel and deal. I don't like the fact, but I understand where Senator Payne is coming from. He is a bad guy. He did sell his soul to the devil, but at the same time, I think he was trying to do it for the right reasons.
He even said, I was once like you, Jeff, but I had to compromise.
It was probably because his best friend got shot in the back for doing what he thought was right, and he didn't want to end up like his best friend. In order to get his things accomplished, he had to sell his soul to the devil to get a lot of the stuff that he wanted to get done.
The movie really glosses that point over as far as what happened to Jeff Smith's dad.
We don't know that much. Yeah.
If there's one part of the movie that I guess you could say that some people would look at as quote-unquote communist, which is absolutely a ridiculous idea, which would be too long to explain in our movie podcast. But he's shot in the back for using his paper to support a union activity, a strike.
It was for a miner's claim. A miner had a claim, and the miner corporation didn't want to honor that claim, and so he stood behind that miner, and that's how he got shot. They talked about this on the train.
Regardless, it was a small person that was standing up against a corporation. It's ridiculous to think that would be considered a quote-unquote communist idea. But it also begs the question, did Taylor have something to do with the death of Jeff Smith's dad? We know Taylor controls the papers, but he also has his hands in all of the businesses and things that happen across the state.
Payne has been under the control of Taylor for 20 years. I just don't know if that's the case, because we don't know a lot about Taylor. We don't know what kind of business he is with. Part of me thought maybe he's in the newspaper business because he has so much control over newspapers and things of that nature. Maybe he is that minor corporation. Maybe that is the case. But based on looking at Senator Payne, I feel like I would see more guilt in the fact that his father got killed. And I don't see that throughout the movies. Either he didn't know about it and Taylor did have him killed, or it's just a separate incident altogether.
Well, what caused me to ask the question, when Taylor provides Jeff Smith the devil's bargain, he offers him the Faustian bargain. He could sell his soul. He could have anything he wanted. He could be the head of any business. He could be the head of a newspaper. He could be anything he wanted. All he had to do was play ball with Taylor at this. That leads me to believe that Taylor's got, and he has said it before in the movie, that he has his hands in everything, in all of the things that happen in the state as far as business goes. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. He might not have ordered his death,
but I'm sure he knew something about it. I mean,
yeah.
If he's buying and selling politicians, buying and selling the governor of the state, he's got his hands in everything.
Taylor is he's a doppelganger for William Randolph Hearst. I mean, that's fairly clear. He owns the press, especially in the state. He has influence on the press in other states because he talks to people when he's trying to discredit Smith from when he's doing the filibuster. He talks to people in the Southwest. He's talking to other states. He is a Hearst type of a villain.
He's a great villain. I really like him as a villain.
There's no redeeming quality. He is as evil as Potter is, and It's a Wonderful Life.
But I think he's more human than Potter. So Potter is always, I'm going to get you, see? I'm going to get you. Whereas Taylor, he laughs at jokes. He seems to have a good time. He's at parties and things of that nature. He's a little bit more humanized than Potter is. There's something a little bit deceiving about that. I mean, when he's talking to Payne, they're joking and they're having fun conversations, whereas Potter is always, nobody likes Potter. everything that comes out of his mouth is evil. So that's why I think I like this character a little bit more than Mr. Potter, just because he can give you anything you want.
He's the devil.
Yeah, he's the devil. He twists and turns things to make them sound great so you would want them. What I don't understand, though, is everybody seems to know about him. We're talking about the beginning here, and we had the governor going out to those special interest groups and telling them who he's picked. And they're like, no, he's Taylor's stooge. They know. And the press seemed to know in Washington about Taylor as well. Everybody seems to know about Taylor except the Senate, the senators, and the committee. Everybody seems to know about Taylor except for them. And here's the other thing. When you have that big dinner for Smith and they're all sitting at that long table, Taylor's there. He's sitting at the table, but Jefferson Smith doesn't seem to know who he is. So you would think that if you're going to sit at the same table as all these big people, that everybody would introduce themselves and you would get to know who Taylor was.
I think Jeff Smith knows who Taylor is.
Who is Taylor? He does ask that question.
Oh, does he?
Later on in the movie, yeah.
That's a ridiculous thing, and that's another problem that I have with his particular character. He's a combination of a lot of different things. Like I said, William Randolph Hearst, but he also has a lot of Boss Tweed from Tammany Hall in New York. He's a power broker. And yeah, and people know about him. I mean, this isn't any different than what we deal with today. On the liberal side, you have George Soros, but on the Republican side, you have the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson and people like that. I mean, they still control a lot of the comings and goings in both of the political parties and agendas. And the senators probably know about Taylor too. I don't think that they really understand the graft that's going on with this project that's going to build a dam on this creek, because they would have no way to know this because they're not from that particular area and they're relying on Payne to know about this and put this in.
It's kind of hard to believe, though, that all the senators, not one, believe in Jefferson Smith. The only one that seems to believe him is the president of the Senate, because he gives them time and over time opportunities to prove himself. And he even tells the senators when they're meeting in the back room there that he's making some sense. But that to me is kind of strange that no senator right there would have thought, yeah, I've heard of this Taylor. I know there's something fishy going on in that state. Just that everybody just all of a sudden jumps on top of him.
Or anybody from the minority party.
Yeah.
Doesn't catch on to this
because, of that.
Right. What's really one of the ironies here, and is something we really don't understand in today's politics being so divided as it is the minority leader is the one who puts Jeff Smith up to be kicked out of the Senate. It's not the majority leader. It's the minority leader from the opposing party. To today's parlance, you would never see that today.
He doesn't like him to begin with because of what happened with the papers. And that's the other thing I'm trying to understand, the papers themselves. Because I know they talked about him meeting with the press earlier, and then Saunders manages to get all these reporters and him together. It would seem like that Payne would have been there for his first meeting with the reporters, because they even talk about it earlier in the film.
Yeah, Payne would have caught on really quickly as to what exactly was going on there. It's a stretch that would have made it to the papers, especially considering Taylor, like I said, he has a lot of influence with the papers. But I understand what the press is doing after they explain themselves, because he's been beating them up, which is something else you would never see.
Well, they also think that he's a stooge as well. Yeah.
That's why they did what they did,
right?
Was to expose him.
And Saunders does it the same reason, because she thinks he's a phony at first. He thinks all this, oh, look at the Capitol, oh, look at everything that's going on. She thinks it's all fake. She doesn't think that he's really that patriotic, that he is that innocent. So that's why she sets him up. It's only till later on that she realizes, this guy's true blue. This guy's the real article. And I'm wondering if Saunders, before she came to Washington, was kind of like that a little bit. Because she talks about that her eyes were big when she came to Washington. And then with years later, it seems like now that all she cares about is the money and the reputation.
She's as jaded as everybody else.
Well, she's seen firsthand how everything's been manipulated. She worked for the senator before Smith, so she already knew about the Willow Creek Dam, and she knew everything that was going on with that. She even makes that little reference to Senator Payne, and Payne's like, yeah, including Willow Creek Dam. She's a smart cookie, and I love the fact that Jefferson Smith acknowledges that she is the smartest person that he's ever met. He even says that he's just wowed by her. And she's a great character. The character is strong, and then other times she wants to just quit the whole thing. Maybe complex is a great word for her character, because I think there's so many different levels to her character. I really enjoy her, and I think Jean Arthur is just amazing. We talked about her in the last film, You Can't Take It With You, but she takes it another notch in this particular movie. Well, Frank Capra loved Jean Arthur. He had her in this film, of course, You Can't Take It With You, and Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Fabulous actress.
I really like her character arc here, and I do think that there is a complexity to her character. She's jaded, but she wants to believe in something. And of course, Jean Arthur does an amazing job in this role, and by all accounts, it's something that she had said to reporters that this was her favorite role that she ever did. And I think she has a lot of chemistry with Jimmy Stewart here, even though that I guess she didn't want him to get the role. I guess she would have preferred Cary Grant to have the role from Mr. Deeds.
Not Cary Grant, Gary Cooper.
Yeah, Gary Cooper to get the role because she started in Mr. Deeds with him. One of the most human characters and more believable characters, because Jeff Smith has an uneven character development, in my opinion, whereas her character is fully developed character that has a particular story arc, and she has a complexity to her that I don't think that Jeff Smith does. And so, in my opinion, I think she's probably the most compelling character out of the whole movie.
I want to disagree. With Jefferson Smith, what I love about this performance by Jimmy Stewart is Jimmy Stewart's facial expressions talking about everything, whether he's talking about America or he's talking about where he came from. His face just kind of tells the story. First of all, he gets to meet his hero. Senator Payne is his hero. You know what they say about meeting your hero is you don't want to meet your hero because it's just going to lead to disappointment. And that's what happens here. He meets his hero. He's excited. At first, everything goes well. He tells him, hey, yeah, go do your boys camp thing and get that bill started. And he is really excited. And then he finds out that his idol is crooked and everything just comes down. And I really do think that Jefferson Smith is complex. I think it's great that Saunders is as complex as he is because she leaves under the pressure, but then comes back. And what's happening? He's crying on the steps, I think over at the Lincoln Memorial. And she gives him that courage, that desire to fight. So I think their story arcs, they work well with each other. And I think they're equally as good. They bring both something to the table. And that's why this movie works as good as it does, is because of their story arcs being at different times, but meshing well together.
What do you think, Eric?
I like Jean Arthur. I like her a lot. I think she's one of the best actresses in the Capra movies. Even the ones that I'm not crazy about, she rises above the cream of the crop, if you will, of the actors and actresses in his movies. And this one is nothing different. She's incredible. I love the way she plays different parts of herself. You can see the true side of her in her character, where she initially thinks, as Ken pointed out, that Jefferson Smith is just, he can't be this gullible. He can't be this lame, this stupid, this naive. And she thinks he's putting on an act and he's just playing a game. And she realizes then that, this is really who he is. And he really is a little bit naive. And he really does love his country and loves the government and wants to make a difference and wants to get this bill passed. I love how she is just so grizzled out and she just can't take it anymore, and she's literally just in it for the money and is just playing the games with the reporters and just to get the money that she is owed for being probably 20 some odd years in government. And then how the tables completely turn and she literally falls in love with him. I mean, she is obsessed with him and she's obsessed with his ideals. She is just probably one of my favorite characters in all of these movies, this being no exception.
I agree.
The stage name Jean Arthur, she goes by Gladys Green, and she took the name Jean Arthur, one for King Arthur, and then I believe Jean for Joan of Arc, but I'm not sure how that works exactly. But it's kind of fitting when she acts, kind of exhibits those type of qualities of those type of characters. She's very strong-willed.
Taking charge of every situation.
Yes.
Yeah, total Joan of Arc.
Sometimes, though, it's out of the spur of the moment, like when she does that thing to him with the reporters. But she's funny. When she's drunk, she's hilarious. And to be honest with you, who I really enjoy, and this is Thomas Mitchell, who plays Diz. Diz is infatuated with her. He wants to marry her. But when they're together, it's fun. I really enjoy him a lot more here than I do in It's Wonderful Life.
Yes.
You know, when he plays the uncle. Here, he's funny. He's engaging. You kind of almost feel bad that he doesn't get the girl because he seems like a really good guy. He's always there for her. He's feeding her food, buying her drinks. He's listening to everything that she's going through, and he's very supportive of her. He's in the friend zone.
Right. Totally in the friend zone.
But she relies on him to do so much. I mean, he is there for her when it's time to say great things about Jefferson Smith. He's the guy that she goes to. She trusts him with her life. He's such a great character. He's the unsung hero, I think, of this movie. I really enjoy his comedic timing, and it's just perfectly cast here.
I'm glad you brought him up. Before we kind of really go into Jefferson Smith at length, he's probably my favorite of, I guess, what you'd call the secondary characters in this play. He's the truth, is what he kind of almost is. He explains to Jefferson Smith why the press did what they did and what the perception is that he has to overcome. And he gives him a real dose of truth. And when Saunders wants something truthful to go out, she knows that he's not going to get bought by the machine. He's going to go out and do what's needed to get the truth out. And he's the one that speaks the truth that Jeff Smith's words are not getting through to the people of his state. Without Diz, they don't know this, and essentially he gets blindsided. The effect would have been even greater had nobody known when Payne brings in all of those Western Union telegrams saying that Jeff Smith should give up the filibuster.
And he really cares for her in the sense because he could easily not say anything.
Right.
Because if there's a guy that's trying to steal your girl, you don't give him a lifeline. You let him drown because you want the girl himself. But he really cares for her and actually blesses the fact that she's in love with Jefferson Smith.
Yeah.
He's like, you're really in love with this guy. And she's like, what do you think? It really is genuine how much he cares for her. Yeah, it's a great relationship. You know, I've listened to some other people talk about this movie, and the relationship between those two is never talked about. But it's a really good friendship. It kind of drives the other half of the movie. You need that friendship because he supports her, and which allows her to eventually have enough strength to support Jefferson Smith. Great writing there. Great story, side story that they have there for this movie.
Oh, I agree. He is a great character. A character that's needed because the viewer has to be able to trust somebody.
He seems like to be the voice of reason. When you have these other shady newspaper guys in, he kind of calls them out for being shady. He's not one of those newspaper guys that go to interview Smith and, make him look bad. He's not one of those guys. He doesn't do that. But you're right. He does explain later why that happened. But he didn't take a part of it. He could have. He was right there when it was all being discussed and being organized. But he is the guy that we trust, like you said, throughout the movie to give us what truly is happening with everything. I think it's an underappreciated character.
He should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Claude Rains was, and so was Harry Carey. He's the president of the Senate.
Not the Cubs announcer.
Yeah, not the Cubs announcer.
Or the White Sox announcer. Different Harry Carey. Holy cow.
It was confusing when I was little, because I would confuse the two. But
and then you had Harry Carey Jr., too, so you had all these Harry Careys. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you, though, more, Ted. And I'm a big Claude Rains guy. I've read his biography. I love Claude Rains, especially in Casablanca that we talked about earlier in the year, or earlier last year. Out of everybody that should have gotten a nomination for Best Supporting Actor, this is where it should have gone.
Yeah. As much as I like Harry Carey's character, I don't think it was supporting actor worthy. No. He didn't have that many lines to really be thrown into that category, in my opinion.
I agree 100%.
I mean, I loved him. I thought he was a comic
he's
relief.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a fun character. But if you're talking about Best Supporting Actor, when I think of that, I think Diz's character is one of those characters that without him, this movie, it loses a lot.
And this movie is nominated for 11 awards.
Oh, yeah. It had the unfortunate being nominated in a year that's considered one of the golden years of movies.
Yeah.
Truly a blessed year of movies that it didn't really have much of a chance.
But there was Gone with the Wind.
Well, Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz. I mean, this is a golden year of movies. And as far as Claude Rains goes, I mean, holy crap. Probably one of the most underrated character actors in movie history.
I believed him as a U.S. Senator.
Yes,
he played the role
too.
so well. It was like watching an episode of West Wing. You really thought he was a U.S. Senator.
Right.
He was right on in his mannerisms, the way he spoke, the way he looked. I mean, it was so believable.
And how he can move from something like doing The Invisible Man and with the Universal Monster Pictures into something like this and then on to Casablanca. I mean,
hell of an actor.
He's truly an amazing actor.
But not enough in this movie to get that nomination. I thought it was a good performance.
I think Payne gets it.
Yeah, I'm not debating him as
Eric.
a nominee in this.
Harry Carey's the one that I had a problem with.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you guys about the Harry Carey because, holy cow, he only has a few lines. But it's his facial expressions. It's his facial expressions that really sell him. It reminds me of Judi Dench, who was at 1 minute of screen time and wins Best Supporting Actress. But what I'm saying here
the
is...
actress from Network was the same way, too.
Yeah, and to be honest, it takes a good actor to be able to act with your face like that.
If we're talking about everybody that's in this film, because you could go down the line about Best Supporting Actors. I actually think Edward Arnold, who plays Jim Taylor, he does a great job. He does a fabulous job as the evil guy who, has the machine that basically can torpedo you at any particular time. But, like I said, it's the Diz character that actually, outside of Stuart and Arthur, that really pushes this movie along. Without him, it loses some of that charm that we need in the film. As much as I like Claude Rains' character, I feel like, even though it's a good performance, I feel like if you put another actor in that role, it doesn't diminish it as much as if you took the Diz character out of it as well. I just think the Diz character is just a little bit more important as far as what we need for this film.
Okay, let's dissect the elephant in the room, which is Jefferson Smith.
You're going to dissect him?
He's a Republican? I didn't know that.
Don't get me wrong. I think that there are essentially three characters at work here in Jefferson Smith. There's one that endears me and makes me love this movie. There's another one. It's like nails on a chalkboard.
Is it him punching out reporters?
That's part of it.
Yeah.
Then there's the person that has the love story, which I buy. I buy 2 out of the 3 of these. What I can't stand, as good as Jimmy Stewart is, it's part of the writing that goes into this. They make him so naive and so over the top as far as being just completely out of his depth. For him then to be in his depth, we're asking a lot of growth for the character in a real short period of time.
Oh, we're going like Rocky 2 to Rocky 3, huh?
Kind of. I do not like how he is written in the first part of this movie.
Walking around with his pigeons and just...
That whole thing. It's way too cheesy for me. I don't believe it because I don't know how much of Jimmy Stewart actually believes it. I mean, I get it. He's supposed to be the patriotic guy that he knows what Lincoln and Washington said by heart, and he's enamored by the Capitol building and everything like that. But it gets annoying, and he shouldn't be an annoying person because the end of this movie, the character that comes out, is one of the most compelling. Jimmy Stewart, for me, has 2 roles that define him as an actor. And it's the last half of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and George Bailey. Those 2 roles have solidified him for me as one of my favorite actors of all time. And I don't believe the beginning of this movie. He's better than this. And the writing here, it really gets on my nerves. It disappoints me every time I watch it. Come on. He can't be that naive.
What can he not be naive about?
Well, like you said, he doesn't know who Taylor is. Everybody in the state knows who Taylor is. Pretty much everybody in Washington knows who Taylor is. And he asks, who's Taylor?
Is he in politics? Is he really in the newspaper business? He really isn't. I mean, he does the boys' life thing, but come on, that's kids' paper. I don't know who runs this state. Does that make me naive and stupid?
He's been deposed, and his name was Mike Madigan. Here's the other thing. He's an adult, but yet we don't know what he does. Now, if you're a Boy Scout leader, you don't make money at being a Boy Scout leader. Those are volunteer jobs. What does he do? That's part of it that I don't think
I'm going to disagree with you here because the Boy Rangers in that state seem to be run by him. And if he is the head of the Boy Rangers in the state of whatever we're talking about, Montana, Wyoming, whatever it is, he's getting some type of salary, I think, for that because he's the head of it. And he does do a paper, and I do think they probably get some money for that paper. Probably not a lot, but this is an organization that has to have some type of charter. So I think he is going to get some type of compensation for what he does. And here's the other reason why I'm going to disagree with you is because of the time frame that we're in. We're in the late 1930s. We don't have TV. We have radio. Things that are on the radio and on the news are kind of fed to us. And so we buy into this idea of what the government is. We're kind of fooled into thinking what politics is really all about. And so I can't fault him for that because he lives in Montana or Wyoming or wherever he's at. I think it's very easily that he can come into Washington not knowing practically anything. But one thing that his character does do is once he knows something, he tries to rectify it. So like when the newspaper guys tell him that he's a stooge, that he's there for 2 months, like almost like a paid vacation, he realizes he should do something about it. He doesn't want to be that guy. So what does he do? He wants to get a bill going.
That's where his character changes.
But that's really early in the film, though. The thing is, he trusts his dad's best friend. That's the thing. That's why he's naive. Because he trusts his dad's best friend that everything that he believes in is true. Because Jefferson Smith is not totally naive, because if we talk about that train ride where him and Payne are talking about his dad, they realize there's evil out there in the world. The problem is Jefferson Smith doesn't believe that Payne is part of that evil.
He's treated very childlike. I guess that might be my biggest complaint, is that he's treated like almost like a child. I think it's extremely unfair. I will have one small bone of contention. If we're going to go because of the time frame that we are in, like I said, we're on the downslope running into World War II. Things have ramped up. We've already lived a decade almost of the Great Depression. People are extremely jaded as far as the average American. The average American knows they don't have any power anymore. I mean, that's what the Great Depression did, was it opened a lot of people, the majority of America's eyes as to who the true power brokers in America were. That's one of the things, too, if we're going by the time frame that we're in, I don't believe that Jefferson Smith as an adult, even though he's a young adult, that he would have been that pie-eyed and naive going into all of this. I think at that point in time, a person of that age would have been more realistic as far as that goes. But I do like where his character changes, because there's a distinct change where he goes from this childlike bumpkin to somebody who is worthy of the place that he's been given, up until the point where he starts with Saunders to write his bill and to get behind it. And it kind of seeps into there where when Saunders is telling him how a bill is written, and he's like, oh, no, they'll understand. Even that's a little bit naive, but that's starting to wear off. He's starting to get it. It's at that point that I feel that he's worthy of the station that he's been given as a senator here. And that's where he starts to earn the end of this movie. Because the end of this movie is one of the most powerful things any American can watch. His portrayal of it, to the point where he collapses, in my opinion, is one of the best as far as I can say. There is true emotion there.
I just don't agree with you that somebody can't be naive. Because it sounds like you don't think anybody could be naive, or at least not at this level. This film is what got me into Jimmy Stewart movies. And why is that the case? Because I was that naive kid. I went to a private school. My parents sheltered me, kept me away from certain things. I didn't really know what life really was until I got into my 20s and started hitting the bar scene and then started getting hurt by people. I didn't know what hurt was until my 20s. So I could relate to Jefferson Smith because he's been in a box for his whole life. I mean, look at it. He works with kids. He's not that naive because he realizes the kids can get into trouble. And that's why he wants the park, is to get the kids off the street. Even in the 1930s, we know that there's problems with maybe gangs and things of that nature because he wants to get them off the street and concentrate on, nature and the government because he has a high opinion of the government. And why does he probably have a high opinion of the government? Because he was taught that the government is a beautiful thing. I remember growing up in the 70s and even into the 80s being told how great our government was. I think if I remember right, Ted, you received a culture shock when you went to college and realized that things that you learned in grade school, high school, and all that stuff were almost kind of a little bit of a fabrication or was very glossy. And I think that's what Jefferson Smith is. I think he's got a glossy view of America, especially American politics. His dad was his best friends with Senator Payne. So he has a person in politics that he looks up to. And everybody tells you that Senator Payne does a great job. In fact, they're looking at him as possibly being the next president of the United States. This is like, for me, who Michael Jordan is, or Walter Payton. He looks at Senator Payne like that. And so all he has is glossy eyes for him. So I'm buying into the naiveness. But as soon as he finds out how certain things work, he changes. Because we see when he goes and does the bird calls and all that stuff with the reporters, again, he trusts people. He's very trusting. Never probably had a reason not to trust anybody because of the people that he surrounds himself with, his mom and kids. So once that trust is broken, what does he do? He goes out and punches out these newspaper reporters. Kind of crazy, kind of strange, but at the same time, he doesn't know how to process it. This is how he processes it because he doesn't know how to handle it. And then once he's sat down and told why this happened to him, he gets it. And that's, I think, the story of Jefferson Smith throughout the rest of the movie, because that happens to him again with Payne. And this time, he doesn't know how to react. He can't. He doesn't want to punch him out. He's sad and he's angry at the same time, and he's defeated, and he tries to walk away. And it's Saunders that comes out and says, hey, we need to fight this. That's why I like this character from beginning to the end, is because I buy into the naiveness. I love watching him talk to Saunders when they're writing the bill about his idea. His facial expressions, I'm buying Jimmy Stewart. You said you don't think Jimmy Stewart bought into that type of naive character. I think he does a great job here. I think he buys into it, and I actually 110% believe that Jimmy Stewart is Jefferson Smith right there.
I'm hearing both your arguments here. I'm processing it. I agree more with Ken on this one. I definitely think that Jimmy Stewart knows where he's going with this, the naiveness argument. I think you make a good case. It's kind of like a courtroom debate here. But I definitely see where Ted is coming from, too. It's the part of the movie that bugged me, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of little nickel and dime stuff, but the punching scene just stands out. Yeah, you got the governor's stupid children. That kind of stood out a little bit. But the punching scene, and you make a good argument, Ken. He doesn't know how to process it because he's a simpleton, if you will. And he just lets his raw emotions fly. But that scene, I don't think that really needed to be there. I think they could have literally jumped from where he's about to start doing that right in the scene where he goes into the reporters club there when he's going in the door.
He goes after just one. He goes after that one reporter. He goes after
just the one, and then all the reporters kind of gang tackle him and hold him down and stuff. That's a great scene because that really tells you where the newspaper industry is in Washington and how they react. They don't have to get elected. They don't have to worry about their jobs. They can report whatever they want and however they want. They've got complete freedom, hence why they did that to him. I think that's a great scene, but the punching scene, it seems like a late 60s Batman. Pow, boom, it seemed really, really hokey, like he's literally just going out and punching people at random on the street.
And I agree with you on that because I don't particularly think that's the best thing. But I think if you chose one guy, that one guy with the glasses, the reporter that started it all, if he's chasing them into that club, I think that works great. I think
that works beautifully.
I think Capra just didn't know how to get it there, And I think he took the long way around and had him punch every... It doesn't lessen my opinion of Jefferson Smith. Again, I think it comes to the point where he just doesn't know how to process the information. And we see that throughout the film, is he doesn't know how to process things. And he needs somebody like Saunders to help him process it. And he needs Dizzy to help him process. He needs people to help him process through this.
Yeah, kind of like when they're framing him and he just walks out. Because he doesn't know how to react. He can't defend himself.
Because there's nobody there to help him. Because Saunders is gone. And his dad's best friend is the one that's attacking him.
Right.
He feels alone. When he feels alone, that's why he's punching people out. But I do agree that I think it could have been left out. There's nothing wrong with him getting angry and going after the one guy, but we don't need to see the actual punches.
It could have been better if he just grabbed the guy by the collar and say, hey, you, what are you doing? The punching thing just seemed like a U.S. senator going out and punching people. Right. Come on.
It's not needed. It's not needed that he disappears. And they have to go look for him.
When he gets there and they're trying to hunt him down on the bus?
And he's going to the sightseeing stuff. It's like, come on.
I agree with that. I agree with you, Ted, on that one.
It ends up being beneath the character. I don't know. There's ways to show somebody that's being naive without selling out the character. The person whoever wrote this, they did such a good job with so many other characters. Why they felt the need to have the swing be so severe from one side to the other with the main character, to me it leaves me a little bit jarring, especially when on one side is part of one of my favorite characters and the other side is like, wow, that's not the same character. But as far as the end of this movie, like I said before, if that doesn't bring out some sort of emotion in you as a viewer, I don't know. I guess I still might have a little bit of naiveness in me, I guess, that the government means something to me. And what he's defending, at the end of the movie, he's defending America. He's not going against graft and things of that nature. He's telling people what America stands for. I buy into it wholeheartedly, and I feel for him. I know, Eric, I think you mentioned, and you can't take it with you, that Jimmy Stewart he doesn't have much depth. This is where I disagree.
I'm with you. This movie definitely, when you get to that end scene when he's doing the filibuster, it is a completely different Jimmy Stewart. Yeah. It is a 180. I agree with you. He comes out definitely Academy Award winning.
Yeah.
This is like A Few Good Men. The courtroom scene. We're right there.
When he grabs those Western Union telegrams, you can see him almost break. I don't know. It moves me. Movies do bring emotions out in me as a person. This is one of those moments in movies that really brings out emotion in me, and it's hard. Almost every time I watch it, I get choked up, just like I do at the end of It's a Wonderful Life. The end of that movie gets me too. I believe I mentioned that in our episode on that. It's amazing to watch an actor bring such emotion where your heart breaks with watching that character just be devastated. It's an amazing thing.
It's like the scene where after he looks at the letters and he looks up at the president of the Senate and he has that kind of a look at defeat. The president smiles at him and he gets that strength back. And he's like, you guys think I'm lit. It's powerful. And the way that the things that he had to do to get his voice raspy like that. And not only is his voice raspy, his breathing is different. He is an actor. He's a pure actor. He wears his emotions on his face. I talked about it earlier when he's talking about America, and I buy into that when he's talking about America earlier, and he's all giddy like a schoolboy, talking about his favorite pastime, which is politics now, I guess. But here at the end, I buy into it even more because of the facial expressions. I don't know if they sprayed him down or something like that, but the sweat is coming. It's hanging off his chin. Everything is perfect the way they do things. The only problem I have with this scene at all is after he collapses, Saunders goes, oh no, it's like, I probably could have not had that. I thought it was beneath her character. I wouldn't mind they pan to her and she's like a little worried, but screaming out I thought was just a little too much. Right. And of course, I would have liked to seen a little bit more at the end there. It's kind of a rough ending, but anything you do beyond this is kind of window dressing. Like a parade for him, or them getting married, or them hugging at the end, or whatever. That's all window dressing, so I guess I'm okay the way it ends. The scene is just great, and what I really also like about this scene is how authentic the Senate looks.
Oh yeah,
This is a soundstage.
right. At the time, it was one of the largest sound stages ever built.
When they first showed it the first time, it's during the day because they meet at noon, and you have the light coming from the top. I actually thought when I originally saw this, and for years after that,
I did too.
I thought it was real. I'm like, how did they film this?
I did too.
In Washington, D.C. It's fabulous. That's why this movie works so well, too, is how authentic it feels. Frank Capra is a genius.
I don't use this term lightly. The end of the movie is almost Shakespearean, how everything comes down. I think that there's at least a couple of plays that you could point to that have that sort of emotion towards the end of the movie. And I agree, Ken. The Saunders thing is a little bit over the top, and I don't like the kid doing the OK symbol up to her and all of that. It's not really needed at that point in time. You guys had mentioned at the end of the movie 7 how at the end you would have liked it to just go black. That almost is kind of where I wanted it to go. I don't think we need anything after the fact that he collapses there. That's the end of the movie. Of course, you get the Claude Rains at the end declaring that he's a bad person. I don't really think that that's needed either. I think that just cut to black after he collapses.
Maybe he just dies right there on the floor.
It would leave it up to the person.
It's like a Sopranos moment.
Kind of.
Well, I do think we need to know that he did accomplish something. So if he falls and we don't know if he's passed out, dead, or whatever, and it ends there, we don't know if he won. And I think it's important that we see, because we do the filibuster here, we need to have a happy ending. And
yeah.
I don't have a problem with the boy going okay, because he's sitting there listening to them, and they're saying that he just fainted, and they don't know about Saunders. They should know because she's been coaching him all this time, and somebody should be letting her know that everything's okay. I would have rather seen her, though, run down as soon as that happened. I would rather have seen her try to get into the Senate, and they try and stop her, and one of the guys say, no, it's okay, let her through.
I agree.
And she gets through, and then they're like, yeah, he's okay, and, she's relieved and things of that nature. But I don't think it's terrible that the boy said it was okay.
You said something in your plot summary.
Uh-oh.
That I never caught. And I've seen this movie, I don't even know how many times. Does Payne try to kill himself?
What else is he trying to do with the gun?
Yeah, he's trying to kill himself.
Does he have a gun?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've never seen a gun.
Yes.
Well, that's because all the other senators are like tackling him because he fired off 2 or 3 shots. But yeah, he tried to blow his head off.
I just thought he was breaking the lights.
No, it's a gun.
No,
out there.
Those gunshots, yeah.
That means a lot more.
Because you think about it, earlier you have Taylor telling him you might as well blow your brains out if anything like this ever gets out. It's kind of going back to that.
He probably knew he carried a gun on him.
Probably did.
Because I never made that connection. I never saw the gun or anything like that. When you mentioned that in the plot summary, I was taken aback because I've never even looked at it that way.
Part of me kind of wishes that he did blow his brains out, but I think we didn't still get that vindication for Smith, because if he does something like that, then they have to really look into it. Yeah, he's guilty. Why else would he do that?
Yeah, there'd be massive inquiries as to what was going on.
Right, exactly. They actually had planned a sequel for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and years later. I'm happy that they didn't do it. I'm really... They did a TV series. I guess it
saw that.
1 year, and we've seen reincarnations of this. The Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy is actually not a bad flick. I would recommend people to go check that out once.
It's not a bad movie. It's actually kind of funny.
But it's in the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington vein, even though he's a con artist that goes to Washington and finds corruption. But yeah, the ending is... There's times where I want more, and then there's times where I'm like, what they did was perfect. And so I'm going to lean on the fact that this movie ends the way it should.
So before we wrap this up, I do want to say this movie gives us a lot. It's almost a civics lesson as to how our government operates. You have Saunders explain how a bill starts. It's the best explanation of what a bill has to go through to get to the president's desk, as I'm just a bill from Schoolhouse Rock. It's how things work. And then we also get the filibuster, which in today's day and age, it's not what it used to be. It used to be what Jeff Smith does. One man or a group of men, a group of senators holding the floor of the Senate. And that's how they would stop a bill. around 1970 is when all of that changed. The parties changed the rules of the filibuster to what it is today, where essentially you don't have to hold the floor of the Senate to stop a bill. Essentially to stop the other side from getting any sort of a bill victory through the Senate. It's not what it used to mean. Ironically enough, the person who held the floor the longest, and this is not a testament to Jefferson Smith, was Strom Thurmond, the senator from South Carolina. He held the Senate floor for 24 hours and 16 minutes. The bill he was holding up was a civil rights bill in 1957. So there's that. But it's an amazing movie that way, that it really shows, take out the corruption and everything like that. Yes, that still exists in Washington. But if you want to know how government works, this is a good blueprint. It's pretty accurate. It's a good tool. I think there's a lot of Americans that probably should take a good look as to how the government's supposed to work.
It's really interesting that you say all this, especially for this movie, because movies are always known to kind of get things wrong when it comes to how certain things work. I think you got to give Frank Capra credit for being responsible with how he shows how things are done. It's a very simplistic way how law is introduced and things of that nature, but it's a good understanding of it. That says a lot about Frank Capra at this particular time. Because other people, when we talk about how certain things done, they always add this new rule. For instance, we talked about Casablanca, and we talked about the papers of transit. And there's no such thing as papers of transit. It's the MacGuffin in that movie. But it's fake. Whereas here, it's an actual law. The bill, I guess you can say, is the MacGuffin here. But it's real. And it's explained to us in a way that we can understand. A very young person, someone like me, 10 or 11 years old, watching this film can understand how it works. But it's not dumbed down. That's the other thing. It's not dumbed down, but it's simplistic.
Very teachable.
Very teachable, exactly.
Well, let's talk about our reviews of this movie. We've definitely gone into some detail of it, and I think it's about time we now talk about how we feel about it. I am going to kick us off. This movie, for me, was a very interesting watch. It's one that I haven't seen in at least probably 2 decades, and I might even be generous with that number. It was a very interesting watch. I watched this 3 times through, and each time I picked up more details. I analyzed it a little bit more. Listening to you guys talk about it really, really helped out. Definitely cleared up some points, made me see some things that I didn't see, some thoughts, some opinions. I don't feel as strongly about this movie as you guys probably do. I know this is an AFI top 100. Hell, might even be a top 25 with them. I know it's in the Library of Congress. It's historically significant. It is a great movie. I'm not going to take that away from it. The filibuster scene is incredible. It's a scene that I could watch over and over again. And you're right, Ted. Anyone who doesn't like that scene's got to screw loose. The rest of the movie, though, it kind of comes and goes. It's got some good parts. It's got some lame parts. It's got some stuff that's just so out of date that it just doesn't click with today's culture. But then it has things that really do transform 60, 70 years down the road. We didn't really talk about the comparisons of today's politicians or today's politics as compared to this movie. And there's a lot of similarities to it. Overall, it's a fun movie. I enjoyed it. I would definitely watch it again, and I might even go out and get a copy of it. It's really a fun movie. It's not a great movie. It's not a movie that is in my top 100, but it's definitely one that I think you should go out there. You should watch. I know in the past, I've been really hard on Jimmy Stewart. I've called him one-dimensional. I'm not his biggest fan, like I know Ken is a very huge Jimmy Stewart fan. But you know what? He stepped up in this one. He did a really good job. For me, this movie is a solid B. Definitely recommend it, and I think you should go out and watch it. And I'm sure we're going to get some really good reviews from my fellows here. Ted, what are your thoughts on it?
This movie is one of those movies that I loved from the first time I saw it. It brings out real emotion in me, and it's not difficult to do because there's quite a few movies that do, but this movie brings an emotions out. It sometimes is difficult to deal with. At its heart, he's talking about America. As far as a movie goes, there's very few that I like better than this. This is probably in a top 25 movie for me. I do feel extremely passionate about the end of this movie, to the point that I called it Shakespearean. It's just an amazing last third of the movie. It's almost perfect. You can't say that about a lot of movies. I think this was number 25 movie in the AFI's original top 100 movie list. This movie made me love Jimmy Stewart even more than I did after watching It's a Wonderful Life. I can't get over how much that I adore this movie. This movie is a solid A for me. If you've not watched it, I think that you should go out and watch it. I pull out this movie at least once a year, sometimes twice. It's a good family watch, too, if you are to sit down with friends and watch. This is a movie that's aged well. It just has a deep personal connection with me, and that's why I give it an A.
I think it's aged well. I can agree with you. There's a few things on it that probably haven't aged very well, but the overall theme of the movie since 2016 is very, very up front and center in today's political culture.
Or January 6th.
Or January 6th even, yeah. Exactly. It's definitely right up there and up front. Ken, take us home. What do you got?
So this film in 1989 was one of 25 films that the Library of Congress deemed for preservation. This movie is that important, not only to movies, but just our history. To me, it's a great film. It's my introduction to my love of movies. This movie was my favorite movie for the longest time. For whatever reason, it took me decades to watch Casablanca, and Casablanca kind of replaced it. But after watching it this past week for this podcast, I was reminded how important, how strong, emotionally attached I am to this movie. No movie's perfect. I don't believe any movie to be perfect. And this movie does have some flaws here and there, and we've all talked about those type of flaws. But this movie has character. This movie reaches down into my soul and speaks to me. It tells me it's okay to be optimistic, to look at things in rose-colored glasses sometimes, and to desire the best for all of us. Jefferson Smith talks about the important role, and that's to love thy neighbor. We're constantly reminded that he does really all this for the people. He does it for those boys, his boys club there. He's a good guy. We wish all our politicians were like him, that they would stand up for what they truly believe in. And they have, at the end of the day, the guts to challenge what's wrong. And I think this movie is the epitome of what we wish the world can be. We know that's not going to be the case, unfortunately. But it's nice to kind of live in that dream world from time to time. This movie, for me, is an A+. I don't give A+s very often. This is going to be one of only 2 movies that you'll ever hear me give an A+ to. The other one was Casablanca. But this one is an A+ to me because Jefferson Smith is kind of the person that I wish I could be. I wish I could be like Saunders. These 2 characters are wonderful characters. And we talked about Diz. All these 3 characters are people that I like and kind of want to be. And why is that? Because at the end of the day, they make the world better. I'm very happy to have talked about this movie. I think it's the first time I've had a smile on my face while I'm talking about my final review of the movie. That's just because this was my introduction, not into movies, but why I love movies. And I will always be appreciative of this film.
All right, one of 2 A+. That's pretty impressive. So overall, we all like the movie. It's great. Ken, what are we going to be previewing for next week?
Our next movie is also a film by Frank Capra, but it doesn't star Jimmy Stewart or Jean Arthur, but it stars Cary Grant, and it's Arsenic and Old Lace.
Arsenic and Old Lace. This is one I've never seen before, so I am looking forward to it. All right. Me and Ted are both looking forward to seeing this one and giving our reviews next on Hooked on Movies. All right, Ted, tell us where they can find us on Twitter.
We can be found on Twitter at hookedon_movies. And also, too, whatever podcast option you're listening to us on, we're available through Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, anywhere you can find podcasts if you can, leave us a rating and review. It helps us get seen by more people. You might not think that it helps, but it does help get our name out there. It makes it easier for us.
And from the numbers we've seen, it looks like people are actually doing that. So thank you out there, listeners.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate
everybody
it.
who's rated and reviewed. We appreciate it. We see you, and we appreciate all of you.
And Ken, on Facebook, you've posted some pretty good articles. We've been getting a lot of talk back on Facebook.
We are having some great interaction out there on our Facebook page. Feel free to share any articles. If you want to talk about our reviews of any of the movies that we've done in the past, feel free to share your opinion. Our opinions are not set in gold. Well, maybe mine are, but not Ted's.
Definitely not mine.
Hey.
No, definitely not Eric's.
No, definitely not mine.
We love to hear your take on these movies as well. And if there's a movie that you want us to do, feel free to share that on our Facebook page or on the Twitter account that Ted monitors himself. We love the interaction. The more that you're into it, the more that we're into it. So join our Facebook group if you haven't done so already.
We're here for you, the listener, everybody, and thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate it. That's all the time we have for this episode of Hooked on Movies. As always, I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11. And maybe one of these days, you'll see that film at 11.
God, I hope not.
I know.
See you at the movies.
See you next time on Hooked on Movies.